The first time I stepped into Victor Maroney's mansion, I knew I was entering a different world. The marble floor gleamed under my worn sneakers, its polished surface reflecting the crystal chandelier that hung like a frozen waterfall above me. The air carried a mix of lemon polish and expensive cologne, so unlike the bleach and struggle scent of my tiny apartment. "You're the new one?" A woman with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun appeared from a side corridor, her black uniform crisp and intimidating. Her eyes, sharp as cut glass, assessed me from head to toe. "Natalia Cortez?" "Yes, ma'am." I smoothed my hands over the simple black dress I'd bought yesterday, the nicest thing I owned, yet it felt painfully inadequate in this palace. "I'm Mrs. Reynolds, the head housekeeper. You'll address me as Mrs. Reynolds, nothing else." She didn't offer her hand, just a clipboard with papers for me to sign. "You've been hired on a probationary basis. Your background check cleared, but Mr. Maroney has final say on all staff." I swallowed hard, pen hovering over the forms. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a waitress at a downtown restaurant, struggling to make rent and juggling medical bills for my 5-year-old daughter, Sophie. Then came the incident. A tray of drinks spilled over an elegantly dressed man. Instead of getting fired, I received a business card and an offer for a housekeeping position at triple my current salary. I hadn't questioned my luck then. I should have. "Mr. Maroney is rarely home, but when he is, you are to be invisible," Mrs. Reynolds continued. "You'll be responsible for the East Wing, including his private office. You do not enter when he's inside. You do not touch papers on his desk. You do not answer his phone. You dust, vacuum, polish, and leave." "Understood?" "Yes, Mrs. Reynolds. Maria will train you." She gestured to a younger woman hovering nearby. "Don't disappoint me." As Mrs. Reynolds clicked away on her sensible heels, Maria flashed me a sympathetic smile. "Don't worry, she's always like that. Come, I'll show you around." Maria was Puerto Rican, about my age, 28, with warm brown eyes that seemed perpetually amused. As we walked through corridors lined with artwork worth more than I'd earn in a decade, she filled me in on the unwritten rules. "Mr. Maroney isn't like normal rich people," she whispered as we passed a room with heavy oak doors. "He has business associates who visit at odd hours. If you see men in suits coming or going, you look down and keep moving." "What kind of business is he in?" I asked, though a cold feeling in my stomach suggested I already knew. The way the security guards stationed throughout the property carried themselves, eyes constantly scanning, hands never far from their jackets, told me enough. Maria's smile faltered. "The kind that pays our salaries, querida. That's all you need to know." By the end of my first day, my feet ached in my new shoes, but the weight of the advance payment in my purse made it worthwhile. Sophie would have her medication this month. We wouldn't have to choose between electricity and food. "You did good today," Maria said as we changed out of our uniforms in the staff quarters. "Just remember, eyes down, ears closed." I nodded, but as I stepped outside into the cool evening air, a sleek black Bentley pulled through the gates. 4 men exited the vehicle. 3 were clearly bodyguards, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the fading light. The 4th, my breath caught. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step deliberate and confident. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting. Strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to glow in the gathering dusk. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean waist. This had to be Victor Maroney. Our gazes met for just a moment, but it was enough to send electricity racing down my spine. His eyes narrowed slightly, assessing me with cool detachment before dismissing me entirely. To him, I was just another servant, invisible as Mrs. Reynolds had instructed. But I'd seen something in that fleeting moment. Behind the wealth and power lurked something dangerous, something that made my instincts scream. Run, I should have listened. 3 weeks passed, and I settled into a routine. Each morning, I arrived at 6, completed my assigned tasks, and left by 3 to pick up Sophie from school. The work was demanding, but straightforward, and the pay allowed me to move us to a better apartment closer to Sophie's school. I rarely saw Mr. Maroney. He kept irregular hours, sometimes absent for days, other times sequestered in his office with visitors who arrived in luxury cars with tinted windows. When our paths did cross, I followed protocol, eyes down, silent, invisible, until the morning everything changed. I was dusting the bookshelves in his study, believing the house empty, when the connecting door to his bedroom opened. I froze, duster in hand, as Victor Maroney appeared in the doorway, wearing only black silk pajama bottoms. I'm sorry, sir, I stammered, backing toward the exit. Mrs. Reynolds said you were away until tonight. He studied me with those piercing blue eyes, his expression unreadable. A jagged scar ran from his left shoulder across his chest, evidence of violence that his expensive suits usually concealed. Other scars marked his torso, telling stories I didn't want to imagine. Your name? His voice was deeper than I expected, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. Natalia, sir. Natalia Cortez. You're new. 3 weeks, sir. He nodded slowly, running a hand through his tousled hair. You have a child. A daughter. My blood turned to ice. How did he know about Sophie? I hadn't mentioned her to anyone except Maria. The background check, he added, noticing my expression. We're thorough. Yes, sir. My daughter is 5. He moved to his desk, picking up a silver frame I'd dusted countless times but never examined closely. Now I could see it contained a photograph of a dark-haired woman holding an infant. My sister and her son, he said, though I hadn't asked. Both gone now. Something in his tone made me look up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. The raw grief in his eyes was startling, humanizing him in a way that made my chest tighten. The moment shattered when his phone rang. He answered with a curt Maroney, his expression instantly hardening to granite. He spoke rapidly in Italian, his free hand clenching into a fist. I should have used this distraction to slip away. Instead, I stood rooted to the spot, watching his face transform with controlled rage. When he ended the call, the look he gave me sent chills down my spine. Forget what you heard, he said flatly. And tell Mrs. Reynolds I'll need the guest rooms prepared for tonight. I'm having company. I nodded and hurried out, heart pounding. Only after I was safely in the hallway did I realize I was still clutching the duster like a shield. Maria found me in the linen closet, hands trembling as I folded towels. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, closing the door behind her. I ran into Mr. Maroney, in his study. Her eyes widened. What happened? Nothing. He knew about Sophie. I lowered my voice. Maria, what exactly does he do? Who is he? She glanced nervously at the door. Natalia, there are things better not to know. I have a daughter. If I'm working for someone dangerous... We all have reasons for being here, she interrupted, her usual cheerfulness gone. I'm sending money to my mother for her cancer treatments. Lucia's putting her brother through college. Mrs. Reynolds has been here 20 years. Rumor is she's actually Mr. Maroney's aunt on his mother's side. She leaned closer. But listen to me. Mr. Maroney protects his people. As long as you're loyal, you and your daughter will never want for anything. Just don't ask questions, and don't repeat anything you hear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maria's words echoed in my mind, along with the memory of Victor Maroney's eyes. Cold one moment, filled with grief the next. I'd stepped into something much bigger than a housekeeping job, and part of me knew I should take Sophie and disappear. But where would we go? Without this salary, her medication would be unaffordable, and something told me that running from Victor Maroney might be more dangerous than staying. The next morning, Mrs. Reynolds assigned me to prepare the guest rooms for Mr. Maroney's visitors. As I was changing sheets in the 3rd bedroom, I heard voices from the adjacent sitting room. The door was slightly ajar, and Mr. Maroney's distinctive voice carried clearly. The shipment arrives tomorrow. Customs has been handled. And the FBI problem? Asked a second voice, heavily accented. Agent Donovan will be taken care of. He's been getting too close to our operations in the harbor. You trust this will be clean? There won't be any connection to us. His brake lines will fail on his way home tonight. Just another tragic accident. I stifled a gasp, nearly dropping the stack of pillowcases I was holding. They were planning to murder someone, an FBI agent. The casual way they discussed it, like ordering dinner, made my stomach churn. The voices moved closer to the door, and I frantically looked for somewhere to hide. There was nowhere to go. I was trapped. "One more thing," Mr. Maroney said, his voice now just outside the bedroom. "I've been informed we may have a leak, someone talking to the feds." My heart hammered against my ribs as the doorknob turned. In desperation, I dropped to my knees beside the bed, pretending to retrieve something from underneath. The door opened, and I felt eyes on my back. "Excuse me, sir," I said without turning, my voice miraculously steady. "I'm just finishing up in here." A long silence followed, during which I was certain he could hear my racing pulse. "See that you do," he finally said, and the door closed again. I remained frozen for several minutes, cold sweat trickling down my spine. I'd just overheard a murder being planned, and somehow I had to act normal, invisible, loyal, for Sophie's sake. That evening, I watched the local news with dread. There was no report of an FBI agent's death, no tragic accident. Maybe they'd changed their minds, maybe I'd misunderstood, or maybe it hadn't happened yet. I called in sick the next day, claiming Sophie had a fever. In reality, I needed time to think, to plan. If I went to the police, what proof did I have? Just overheard snippets that could be explained away. And if Mr. Maroney discovered my betrayal? As I helped Sophie with her homework, my phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Cortez." Victor Maroney's voice sent ice through my veins. "I hope your daughter is feeling better." "Mr. Maroney." I struggled to keep my voice neutral. "Yes, thank you. It's just a slight fever. Children are so fragile, aren't they?" His tone was conversational, but the underlying message was clear. "I've sent my personal doctor to your address. He should be arriving shortly." "That's not necessary. I insist. My employees receive the best care." A pause. "We wouldn't want her condition to worsen." The doorbell rang, and Sophie looked up from her math worksheet. "That will be Dr. Reeves," Mr. Maroney continued. "I'll expect you back tomorrow, Ms. Cortez. We have much to discuss." The line went dead, and I stood frozen, staring at my front door. He knew where we lived. He'd sent someone to my home. The threat wasn't even thinly veiled. I opened the door to find an elderly man with kind eyes and a medical bag. "Dr. Reeves," he introduced himself. "Mr. Maroney sent me to check on your daughter." "She's not really sick," I admitted quietly. He nodded, unsurprised. "Nevertheless, I should examine her." Mr. Maroney would expect a thorough report. As he gently checked Sophie's temperature and listened to her breathing, I realized I was trapped in an invisible cage. Victor Maroney had sent a clear message. He was watching us. There was nowhere to hide. "Your daughter is in perfect health, Doctor," Reeves announced with a smile, "though I'd recommend less sugar. These cavities will need attention." He handed me a business card for a pediatric dentist. "Call this number tomorrow. All expenses are covered under Mr. Maroney's employee healthcare program." After he left, I sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, watching her sleep. The innocent face of my reason for living, unknowingly caught in a dangerous web because of me. Tomorrow I would have to face Victor Maroney, pretending I hadn't heard his murder plot, pretending I wasn't terrified of him. For Sophie's sake, I would walk back into the lion's den, but lions aren't known for their mercy. I returned to work the next morning, my nerves raw from a sleepless night. Sophie had gone to school with a kiss on her forehead, and no knowledge of the fear churning in my stomach. I'd arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, to pick her up after school, just in case. The mansion seemed different now, its grandeur tainted by what I knew. Every security camera felt like an accusing eye, every guard a potential executioner. I changed into my uniform mechanically, avoiding Maria's concerned glances. "You okay, querida?" she asked as we prepared breakfast trays. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just worried about Sophie," I lied, arranging croissants on fine china. "She's staying with a neighbor today." Before Maria could respond, Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, her usual stern expression replaced by something close to anxiety. "Natalia, Mr. Maroney has requested you bring his breakfast personally." She handed me a silver tray already prepared with coffee, toast, and the morning newspaper. He's in his study. Maria's eyes widened, but she said nothing. The weight of unspoken warning hung between us as I took the tray, my hands trembling slightly. "Don't keep him waiting, Mrs. Reynolds added, adjusting my collar with unexpected gentleness. The walk to his study felt eternal. Each step on the plush carpet echoed in my mind like a countdown. I'd rehearsed what to say, how to act. Normal, respectful, oblivious. But as I reached the heavy oak door, all my carefully planned words evaporated. I knocked softly. Enter. Victor Moroni sat behind his massive desk, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He gestured for me to set the tray down without looking at me. I did as instructed, trying to make myself invisible as I'd been trained. "Aspetta," he said into the phone, then covered the mouthpiece. "Close the door on your way out. Return in 30 minutes to collect the tray." I nodded, backing toward the exit, grateful for the reprieve. But as my hand touched the doorknob, his voice stopped me. "And, Natalia, we'll discuss your absence yesterday when you return." The 30 minutes crawled by as I dusted the same bookshelf in the library 3 times. When I couldn't delay any longer, I returned to his study, knocking with more confidence than I felt. No answer came. I knocked again, louder this time. Silence. Protocol dictated I should inform Mrs. Reynolds, but curiosity, or perhaps fatalism, pushed me to open the door slightly. "Mr. Moroni?" The study was empty, the breakfast tray untouched except for the coffee cup. I stepped inside, intending only to retrieve the tray, when I noticed the newspaper was open to a specific article. FBI agent survives suspicious car accident. My blood ran cold as I scanned the first paragraph. Agent Thomas Donovan had escaped with minor injuries when his car went off the road last night due to brake failure. Police were investigating. The plan had failed. A sound from the connecting bedroom made me jump. I should have left immediately, but panic froze me in place. The bedroom door was partially open, and through the gap, I could see a large 4-poster bed. Victor Moroni lay atop the covers, eyes closed, breathing deeply. He was asleep. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a new wave of terror. If he woke and found me standing here, reading the newspaper. I carefully picked up the tray, taking extra care not to let the china rattle. As I backed toward the door, his voice stopped me cold. "What do you think, Lucia? Should we tell him about the girl?" My heart nearly stopped before I realized he was still lying motionless, eyes closed. He was talking in his sleep, or pretending to. "No. He's too soft on her already," came a woman's voice from inside the bedroom. "That child isn't his responsibility." I hadn't realized anyone else was in the room. The woman, Lucia, another maid, must have been changing linens or tidying up while he napped. "She looks so much like Isabella," Victor murmured, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Same eyes." "That's why you need to let it go," Lucia responded. "The resemblance is a coincidence. You've done enough, paying for her medication, giving her mother a job." My hands began to shake so badly I had to set the tray back down. They were talking about me, about Sophie. He should never have abandoned them. Victor continued, voice hardening even in apparent sleep. His own blood. "What Carlos did isn't your fault," Lucia said, "and if he ever finds out you've been helping them behind his back, my brother made his choice, I've made mine." I backed away silently, leaving the tray forgotten on his desk. My mind raced with fragments of their conversation, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Carlos, Victor's brother, connected to us somehow. Sophie's medication. Had Victor been paying for it all along? I made it to the hallway, closing the door silently behind me, before collapsing against the wall, legs suddenly too weak to support me. The implications were overwhelming. If what they said was true. "Natalia," Maria's voice pulled me back to reality. "Are you sick? You're white as a sheet." "I need air," I managed to say. "Just for a minute." She glanced at the closed study door, then took my elbow, leading me quickly toward the garden terrace. Outside, the cool autumn air helped clear my head, but the questions continued to swirl like leaves in the wind. "What happened in there?" Maria asked once we were alone among the rose bushes. I hesitated, remembering her warnings about loyalty. But if anyone might have answers, it would be Maria. Do you know if Mr. Maroney has a brother named Carlos? Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. Where did you hear that name? Then it's true, I pressed. He exists? Maria looked around nervously before leaning closer. Carlos Maroney is Victor's younger brother. They had a falling out years ago. Nobody mentions him, ever. She gripped my arm. Natalia, how do you know that name? I couldn't tell her about overhearing Victor's conversation with Lucia. Not without admitting I'd been eavesdropping. I think he might be Sophie's father. The words hung between us, a confession I hadn't fully processed myself. Carlos Maroney, my daughter's father, was Victor Maroney's brother. 5 years ago, I'd fallen hard for a charming, wealthy man who called himself Carlos Santos. He disappeared when I told him I was pregnant, leaving nothing but a fake name and number. I'd never expected to find him. Had given up years ago. Now, the possibility that he was connected to my employer, to the man whose murder plot I'd overheard, was too much to comprehend. Maria's face paled. Dios mío, she whispered. Are you certain? No, I admitted, but there's something going on. Mr. Maroney seems to know things about Sophie, about her medication needs, and just now, I overheard something about a resemblance to someone named Isabella, his sister. Maria said automatically, then clapped a hand over her mouth. Forget I said that. Forget all of this, Natalia. For your sake. For Sophie's sake. Before I could respond, Mrs. Reynolds's voice cut through the garden. Natalia, Mr. Maroney is asking for you. Maria squeezed my hand. Be careful what you say, she whispered, before hurrying back inside. I found Victor Maroney fully dressed now, standing at the window of his study when I entered. He didn't turn around immediately, leaving me to stand awkwardly by the door. You forgot to take the tray, he said finally, his back still to me. I apologize, sir. I moved to retrieve it, noticing the newspaper was now folded closed, the incriminating article hidden from view. Did you read it? His question was casual, but tension radiated from his shoulders. Read what, sir? He turned then, his blue eyes searching mine for deception. The newspaper. I held his gaze, channeling years of hiding bills from Sophie, of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. No, sir. I don't make a habit of reading other people's papers. Something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or disappointment that his trap had failed. Your daughter, he said, changing tactics. Sophie. How is she feeling today? Much better, thank you. I clutched the tray tighter, knuckles whitening. And thank you for sending Dr. Reeves. It was unnecessary, but kind. Kindness has nothing to do with it. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. You're under my employ, which means your daughter is under my protection. Remember that. The way he emphasized protection made it sound more like a threat than a reassurance. I understand, Mr. Maroney. Do you? He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, with notes of cedar and spice. I think perhaps you don't. Without warning, his hand shot out, gripping my wrist and causing the china to rattle on the tray. He took it from me with his other hand, setting it aside without breaking eye contact. You were outside my bedroom door for quite some time, he said softly. Listening, perhaps. My throat went dry. I knocked, but you didn't answer. I thought you might have stepped out, yet the connecting door was open, and you could clearly see I was inside. His grip tightened. What did you hear, Natalia? The use of my name, the intensity in his eyes, broke my resolve. Something about Carlos, I admitted. And Sophie. His expression hardened, but he released my wrist. My brother, he said flatly. A worthless gambler and womanizer. You think he's Sophie's father? It wasn't a question. Victor moved to the window again, creating distance between us. The timing fits. The resemblance is striking, especially to our sister, Isabella. I never knew his real name, I said, rubbing my wrist where his fingers had left red marks. He called himself Carlos Santos. That's his gambling alias. Victor's laugh held no humor when he needs to disappear from his debts. My mind struggled to process this confirmation. Sophie's father, the man who'd abandoned us, was the brother of one of the most dangerous men in the city. And somehow, Victor had been watching over us all along. "The medication," I said slowly. "Sophie's health insurance. That was you?" He shrugged, the gesture incongruously casual. "Family is family, even when they don't know it. Does Carlos know? About Sophie?" Something dangerous flashed across Victor's face. My brother relinquished any right to know his daughter when he abandoned her mother. He turned fully to face me. "And now we have a problem, Natalia." My heart sank. "Because I know the truth. Because you know too many truths." He gestured to the newspaper, about Agent Donovan, for instance. I stiffened, caught in my lie. "I didn't. Spare me." He waved a dismissive hand. "The cameras in this room recorded everything. I know exactly how long you stood reading that article." Terror washed over me as I realized the full extent of my situation. He knew I'd overheard his murder plot. He knew I'd lied about it. And now he knew I was aware of the family connection to Sophie. "Are you going to kill me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Victor's eyebrows rose, genuine surprise crossing his features before he laughed, a rich, unexpected sound. "Kill you? The mother of my niece? What kind of monster do you think I am?" "The kind who arranges brake failures for FBI agents," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. His amusement vanished. "You understand nothing about my business or the choices I'm forced to make. I understand enough." I squared my shoulders, fear giving way to maternal protectiveness. "If you're Sophie's uncle, then I need to know what that means for her safety, for our future." He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "When I arranged for you to spill that tray of drinks on me at the restaurant, when I engineered this whole scenario to keep an eye on my brother's abandoned child, I thought you'd be easier to manage." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "You planned all of this? The job offer? Everything?" "I protect what's mine," he said simply. "Sophie is Maroney blood. When I discovered her existence, and Carlos's abandonment, certain arrangements had to be made. We're not yours," I hissed, anger finally breaking through my fear. "Sophie is my daughter, not some pawn in whatever twisted game you're playing with your brother." Victor moved with startling speed, suddenly looming over me, his presence overwhelming. "You misunderstand me, Natalia. I'm not your enemy." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "But I'm about to become your only protection." "What are you talking about?" "Carlos knows about Sophie now." His blue eyes held mine, intense and unblinking. "Someone told him. And unlike me, my brother doesn't believe in responsibility. He sees her as a liability, evidence of his past indiscretions that could cost him his current engagement to an heiress." Cold dread pooled in my stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means you're not safe anymore," Victor said bluntly. "Neither of you are. Not without my help." I thought of Sophie, her gap-toothed smile when I dropped her off at school this morning, unaware that her world was about to change forever. "What do we do?" "You have two choices." Victor returned to his desk, suddenly all business. "Leave town tonight. New names, new identities. I'll provide enough money to start over somewhere Carlos can't find you. Or stay under my direct protection." His expression was unreadable. "Move into the East Wing guest suite with Sophie. Let me handle Carlos my way." "Live here?" I gestured around incredulously. "In a house where murder is planned over breakfast?" His jaw tightened. "Agent Donovan has been investigating my family for years. He's not the noble civil servant you imagine." "That doesn't justify—" "I'm not asking for your moral approval," he interrupted. "I'm offering you protection. For Sophie's sake, if not your own." I closed my eyes, thoughts racing. Leave everything behind, run from a man I'd never met, but who apparently wanted to erase his past, or live under the same roof as Victor Maroney. A man capable of ordering deaths while sipping his morning coffee. "I need time to think," I said finally. Victor nodded, almost sympathetic. "You have until tonight. My driver will take you to collect Sophie from school now. Pack whatever you need from your apartment." He held out a black credit card. "Use this for anything else." I stared at the card without taking it. "And if we run, what then?" "Then I wish you luck," he said. But his tone suggested he thought we'd need more than luck. "Carlos has connections I don't control." But you're the powerful one, I said, confused. The head of the family. A bitter smile crossed his face. Power isn't always where it appears to be. He pressed the card into my palm, closing my fingers around it. Choose wisely, Natalia, for both your sakes. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me once more. One last thing. If you're wondering why I'm helping you, why I've been helping all along. He picked up the silver frame from his desk, the one with his sister and her child. Isabella died because Carlos was too proud to ask for my help. Her son, my nephew, died with her. I won't let history repeat itself. I left his study with more questions than answers, the black credit card burning in my pocket like a brand. In the span of one morning, everything I thought I knew had shattered. Sophie's father was alive, dangerous, and apparently a threat. Her uncle was a criminal who had orchestrated our entire relationship from the beginning, and I had hours to decide which devil to run from and which to embrace. The black SUV that delivered Sophie and me back to our apartment felt like a hearse. Sophie chatted excitedly from her booster seat, oblivious to my inner turmoil as she recounted her day at school, a gold star for her math worksheet, a new friend named Lily, the hamster she got to hold during science. Mommy, why did a different car pick me up today, and why are we packing our things? She stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching as I pulled her favorite clothes from drawers and folded them into a suitcase. We're going on an adventure, sweet pea. I forced brightness into my voice. Remember how you said you wanted to live in a castle someday? Well, we're going to stay in a house that's almost like a castle, with big gardens and fancy rooms. Her eyes widened. For real? For how long? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Maybe for a while. Is it because of the bad men? My hands froze mid-fold. What bad men, Sophie? She shrugged, the movement so casual it broke my heart. I heard Mrs. Patel talking to her husband. She said bad men were watching our building. That's why she made me stay inside during recess yesterday. A chill ran through me. Carlos's men had already been watching us, even before today. Victor hadn't been exaggerating the threat. Did you see anyone watching you? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She shook her head, dark curls bouncing. Nope, but Mrs. Patel showed me a picture and said if I ever saw that man, I should run away and find a policeman. I sat on her bed, pulling her into my arms. What did the man look like, Sophie? Like the man from your old pictures, she said, and my blood turned to ice. The ones you keep in your memory box. Mrs. Patel said he was a bad person who might try to hurt us. Mrs. Patel, my elderly neighbor who'd been watching Sophie after school for years, had recognized Carlos from the few photographs I'd kept. And she'd been protecting my daughter without telling me, afraid of frightening me. How long had this been going on? We're going somewhere safe, I promised, holding her tighter. Somewhere with guards and gates, where no bad men can find us. Like a fortress? Her eyes lit up, finding adventure where I saw only danger. Exactly like a fortress. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Now, which stuffed animals absolutely have to come with us? An hour later, the SUV was loaded with our essential belongings. I'd left a note for Mrs. Patel, thanking her and promising to call once we were settled. As we pulled away from the curb, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted too darkly to see inside. One of Victor's men? Or Carlos's? The distinction suddenly seemed crucial. Sophie fell asleep on the drive back to the mansion, her head resting against my shoulder. Whiskers the stuffed cat clutched to her chest. I studied her peaceful face, searching for the resemblance Victor had mentioned. She had my coloring and curly hair, but her eyes, those I'd always known came from her father. Now I understood why Victor had frozen the first time he saw me with Sophie. Those were Maroney eyes, the same startling blue as his own. The SUV passed through the mansion's gates just as dusk was falling. Security seemed heavier than usual, more guards patrolling the perimeter, additional men stationed at the entrance. News of Carlos's interest in his daughter had clearly put the household on high alert. Mrs. Reynolds met us at the door. Her usual stern demeanor softened slightly at the sight of Sophie. Everything is prepared in the East Wing. she said, gesturing for one of the security men to bring in our luggage. "Dinner will be served in your suite at 7. "Mr. Maroney?" I asked, uncertain what our status was now. "He's handling some business matters," she replied with careful vagueness. "He asked that you make yourselves comfortable and said he'll speak with you both in the morning." Sophie, now awake and wide-eyed at the grandeur surrounding her, tugged at my hand. "Mommy, is this really where we're staying? It's like a palace." Mrs. Reynolds's lips curved in the closest approximation to a smile I'd ever seen from her. "Would you like a tour, young lady? We have a kitchen with the most extraordinary cookie jars." To my surprise, Sophie immediately put her hand in Mrs. Reynolds's outstretched one. "Can we see the cookies first?" "Sophie," I began, not wanting to impose. "It's quite all right," Mrs. Reynolds interrupted. "Mr. Maroney was most specific about making his niece feel welcome." She emphasized the word niece with meaning. "Perhaps you'd like to freshen up while I show Sophie around. The suite is up those stairs, first corridor on the right." I hesitated, reluctant to let Sophie out of my sight in this dangerous new world. But Mrs. Reynolds's expression held a gentleness I hadn't seen before, and Sophie was already chattering about what kinds of cookies might be waiting. "I'll be right upstairs if you need me," I told Sophie, receiving a distracted nod in return as Mrs. Reynolds led her toward the kitchen. The suite turned out to be larger than our entire apartment. A spacious sitting room with plush sofas and a fireplace, a master bedroom with a canopied bed, and a smaller room decorated in pastel colors with a twin bed covered in stuffed animals. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to create a child's paradise, complete with a bookshelf stocked with titles I recognized from Sophie's bedtime requests. Our bags had already been delivered and unpacked, our clothes hanging in cedar-scented closets. Even Sophie's favorite cereal sat on a shelf in the small kitchenette, alongside her preferred brand of juice. The level of detail was both impressive and unsettling. How long had Victor been planning this? I was examining a framed photograph on the mantel, a younger Victor with his arm around a beautiful dark-haired woman who had to be Isabella, when a soft knock came at the door. Maria stood in the hallway, a hesitant smile on her face. "I thought you might want some company," she said, and answers. I stepped back to let her in, grateful for a friendly presence. "I have so many questions I don't even know where to start." She glanced around the suite with a low whistle. "East wing. He's really pulled out all the stops. What does that mean?" "This is family territory," she explained, running a finger along the polished mantel. "Mrs. Reynolds, the security team, a few senior staff. They're the only ones allowed in this wing. Well, and Mr. Maroney's closest associates. We're prisoners in a gilded cage," I murmured, sinking onto one of the sofas. Maria sat beside me, her expression sympathetic. "It's more complicated than that." She leaned closer. "The East Wing has its own security system, separate from the rest of the house. It's a fortress within a fortress, because of Carlos." She nodded. "The brothers have been at odds for years. Victor is the head of the family business, legitimate and otherwise, but Carlos has always resented being second. He's built his own organization, smaller but vicious. They maintain a truce most of the time, but..." She trailed off. "But now I've complicated things," I finished for her. "Sophie has," she corrected gently. A Maroney air that Carlos never acknowledged. "If word gets out, it would damage his standing with his future in-laws. Old money, very traditional. And it would strengthen Victor's position as the family patriarch, protecting the next generation while Carlos abandoned his own blood." The political implications made my head spin. My daughter, my sweet, innocent Sophie, was a pawn in a Machiavellian power struggle between criminal brothers. "What am I supposed to do?" I whispered, fear threatening to overwhelm me. "Sophie deserves a normal life, not this." Maria took my hand. "Normal is a luxury in this world, Carita. But safe? Victor Maroney can give her that." She squeezed my fingers. "He's not a good man by most standards, but family means everything to him. Since Isabella died, he told me about her," I said. "And her son." "Then you understand." Maria stood, moving to the window to gaze out at the darkening gardens. "After their deaths, something in Victor changed. He became harder, more ruthless in business, but almost obsessive about protecting what family remained. Even family he didn't know existed until recently," I asked skeptically. Maria's expression grew troubled. That's the part I don't understand. Victor has known about Sophie for years, since before she was born. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. I never told anyone who her father was. I didn't even know his real name until today. All I know is that when I started working here 3 years ago, Mr. Maroney already had a file on you both. He would get updates about Sophie's health, your financial situation. She shrugged apologetically. I saw the reports sometimes when I cleaned his office. My mind raced back over the past 5 years. The mysterious health insurance that appeared just when Sophie needed specialized care. The scholarship to the good preschool I couldn't possibly afford. The rent assistance program that seemed too good to be true. All Victor's doing. Why wait so long to bring us here? I wondered aloud. Why engineer that spilled tray of drinks now? Before Maria could answer, the suite door opened and Sophie burst in, her face smeared with chocolate and her eyes bright with excitement. Mommy, Mrs. Reynolds showed me the cookie room and the garden with the fountain, and she says there's a movie room where we can watch anything we want. Can we live here forever? Behind her, Mrs. Reynolds appeared, looking slightly apologetic. She's quite energetic. Too many cookies, I said with a forced smile. Perhaps. Mrs. Reynolds handed me a folded note. From Mr. Maroney. Dinner will be up shortly. After they left, I unfolded the note with trembling fingers. Natalia, business requires my attention tonight. Make yourself at home. We'll talk tomorrow about arrangements for Sophie's safety and education. My men are stationed throughout the property. You're protected here. V. The brevity was somehow reassuring. No flowery words, no attempts to soften our situation, just practicalities and a promise of protection. What does it say? Maria asked. That we're safe, I replied, though the word felt hollow. Safe from Carlos, perhaps, but trapped in Victor Maroney's world with no clear way out. Dinner arrived on silver trays. Sophie's favorite mac and cheese alongside a more sophisticated pasta dish for me, with a bottle of expensive wine I didn't touch. After Maria left, and Sophie was bathed and tucked into her new bed, surrounded by stuffed animals, I finally allowed myself a moment alone with my thoughts. I sat by the window, watching moonlight spill across the manicured lawn. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and vigilant. Beyond the walls, Carlos Maroney was somewhere in the city, a man I'd once loved now transformed in my mind to a nameless threat. And somewhere in this very house, Victor Maroney, murderer, criminal, protector, was making plans that would shape our lives. I must have dozed off in the chair because a noise at the suite door startled me awake. The clock read just past midnight. I tensed, listening. The door opened silently, and a tall figure slipped inside. Victor Maroney stood in the entryway, moonlight catching the silver at his temples. He wore no jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal powerful forearms marked with faint scars. He looked tired, the mask of control slipping just enough to show the weight of whatever business had occupied his evening. You're still awake, he observed quietly. Apparently not, I replied, straightening in the chair. Is something wrong? He moved further into the room, his movements fluid despite evident exhaustion. No. I wanted to check that you were settling in. His eyes drifted to the closed door of Sophie's bedroom. How is she? Excited, confused. She thinks this is all a grand adventure. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Children are resilient that way. An awkward silence fell between us. I had 1,000 questions, but in the intimate darkness of midnight, they all seemed too weighty to voice. Victor broke the silence first. There's something you should know about Carlos. My stomach clenched. What about him? The timing of his sudden interest in Sophie isn't coincidental. Victor sank onto the sofa across from me, running a hand through his dark hair. 3 days ago, he announced his engagement to Elena Kozlov. The name meant nothing to me, and? Her father is Mikhail Kozlov, Russian. Old money, new power. The marriage would solidify an alliance between our families and the Kozlov organization. What does this have to do with Sophie? Victor's blue eyes, so like my daughter's, held mine steadily. Everything. The Kozlovs place immense value on family loyalty. If they learned Carlos had abandoned his own child, he shrugged. The engagement would be off, along with the alliance Carlos has spent years building. Understanding dawned, so he wants to eliminate the evidence. Sophie and me. Carlos always was efficient, Victor said, his tone darkening. One car accident, and his path to power is clear again. The casual way he referenced our potential murders made my blood run cold. And you? What do you get out of protecting us? He seemed surprised by the question. Sophie is my niece. You've known that for years, according to Maria. Yet you kept your distance. Why the change now? Victor stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at his domain. Isabella's son would have been 7 this year, he said, his voice so low I barely caught the words. After they died, I swore to protect what family remained. That included watching over Carlos's abandoned child from afar. But not bringing us into your home, I pressed. Not until now. What changed, Victor? The use of his first name slipped out accidentally, but he didn't seem to notice. Intelligence came in last week. Carlos has been making moves against me, testing my territory, my alliances. I suspected a larger play was coming. He turned back to face me. When I learned about the Kozlov engagement, everything fell into place. Sophie had become a liability he needed to eliminate before finalizing the deal. So we're pawns in your game with your brother, I said bitterly. Political leverage. Anger flashed across his features. Is that what you think? That I engineered all this? Your job here, this suite, the security, as some elaborate power play, didn't you? He moved toward me with predatory grace, stopping when just a foot separated us. If all I wanted was leverage, Natalia, I would have announced Sophie's existence to the world the moment I confirmed she was Carlos's daughter. I would have paraded her in front of the Kozlovs and watched my brother's empire crumble. The intensity in his eyes made me shrink back in my chair. Then why didn't you? Because she deserves better than to be a weapon, he said fiercely. Because you both deserved a chance at normal lives, away from all this. He gestured around us. I kept my distance, provided what support I could without interference, until Carlos forced my hand. Something in his vehemence made me believe him, despite everything I knew about who he was, what he did. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Now we adapt. He stepped back, his expression softening slightly. Sophie will need tutors. The local schools aren't secure enough. You'll continue your work here if you wish, or I can arrange another position that allows you to stay close to her. And Carlos? A darkness passed over Victor's face. I'll handle my brother. The way he said it, cold, final, sent a chill through me. You're going to kill him. Would that bother you? He asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. After what he did to you? After what he planned for Sophie? I thought of the man I'd known as Carlos Santos. His charming smile, his passionate declarations, his easy lies. The father who had never once tried to find his daughter, who now saw her only as an inconvenience to be removed. I don't know, I answered honestly. Victor nodded, as if my ambivalence confirmed something. Get some rest, Natalia. Tomorrow will bring changes for all of us. He moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the knob. One last thing. The FBI agent, Donovan. He survived the brake failure because I ordered it that way. I stared at him, confused. What? The conversation you overheard was staged. I needed to know if you could be trusted, if you would run to the authorities. A grim smile touched his lips. You didn't. Even when you believed a man's life was at stake, you protected Sophie first. That's when I knew you belonged here. Before I could process this revelation, the test I'd unknowingly passed, he was gone, the door closing silently behind him. I remained by the window, watching the moon track across the sky, feeling the foundations of my world shift once again. In the span of a day, I'd learned that my daughter's father was a dangerous man who wanted us dead, that her uncle had been our secret benefactor for years, and that I'd somehow become entangled in a blood feud between criminal brothers. Most disturbing of all, I was beginning to feel something for Victor Moroni that went beyond gratitude or fear, something I couldn't name yet, but that pulled me toward him despite everything I knew he was capable of. In Sophie's room, I heard her stir and murmur in her sleep. Whatever came next, whatever impossible choices lay ahead, one thing remained certain. I would protect my daughter, even if that meant accepting Victor Maroney, with all his darkness and contradictions, as our shield against the world. The next 2 weeks settled into a surreal routine. Sophie thrived in her new environment, blissfully unaware of the dangerous currents swirling around her. A kind-eyed woman named Ms. Powell arrived each morning to tutor her, transforming the sweet sitting room into a classroom filled with books, educational games, and art supplies. In the afternoons, Sophie explored the mansion's secure gardens with Mrs. Reynolds, who had revealed an unexpected tenderness toward my daughter. I continued my duties as a housekeeper, though now limited to the east wing where we lived. The other staff treated me differently, a subtle deference that made me uncomfortable. I wasn't quite staff anymore, but neither was I family. I existed in a liminal space, protected by Victor's name, but not truly belonging to his world. Victor himself remained an enigma. Some days he joined Sophie and me for dinner, watching with quiet intensity as she chattered about her lessons. Other days he disappeared entirely, attending to business that I deliberately didn't ask about. When our paths crossed, something electric hung in the air between us. Unspoken questions, unacknowledged tension, the strange intimacy of shared secrets. It was during the 3rd week that everything changed again. I was arranging fresh flowers in the East Wing sitting room when Maria burst in, her face pale with urgency. "Natalia, where's Sophie?" she demanded, glancing around the empty room. "In the garden with Mrs. Reynolds." "Why? What's wrong?" She grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the window that overlooked the rear gardens. "Look." Below, I could see Sophie feeding the koi in the ornamental pond, Mrs. Reynolds beside her. 2 guards stood nearby, alert, but relaxed. The scene appeared perfectly normal. "I don't understand." "Not there," Maria hissed, pointing beyond the garden walls to the tree line that marked the property's boundary. "There." At first, I saw nothing, but then a flash of movement caught my eye. A figure in dark clothing slipping between the trees, the metallic glint of binoculars catching the sunlight. "Someone's watching," I whispered, fear clutching at my throat. "Carlos's men." "Victor thinks so." Maria's voice dropped even lower. "There was an attempt to breach the east perimeter last night. The guards intercepted them before they got close, but..." She trailed off, her expression grave. "But what, Maria?" "One of the men they caught was working for us. A guard who'd been with the family for years. Carlos turned him. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The fortress wasn't as secure as we'd believed. The enemy was already inside. "We need to get Sophie," I said, already moving toward the door. Maria caught my arm. "Victor sent me to tell you to pack a bag, just essentials. He's moving you both tonight." "Moving us where?" "The lake house. It's more remote, easier to secure. Mrs. Reynolds is bringing Sophie up now to help her pack." As if summoned by her name, Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, Sophie skipping alongside her, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Mommy, we saw the biggest fish ever!" Sophie exclaimed, rushing toward me. "Mrs. Reynolds says it's probably 100 years old." I forced a smile, kneeling to hug her tightly. "That's amazing, sweet pea." "Listen, we're going on another adventure tonight. We need to pack a special bag, just like when we came here. Can you help me choose what toys should come with us?" Sophie's eyes lit up with excitement rather than fear. "Are we going to another castle?" "A house by a lake," Mrs. Reynolds answered. Her usual crisp tones softened for Sophie's benefit, with a private beach and a boat dock. As Sophie darted into her room to assess her stuffed animal collection, Mrs. Reynolds fixed me with a meaningful look. "Mr. Maroney will meet you there tomorrow. Tonight you'll be accompanied by his most trusted security team." "How bad is it?" I asked quietly, so Sophie couldn't hear. A flicker of genuine concern crossed the older woman's face. "Bad enough that Victor is calling in favors from old friends. The Kozlovs are pressuring Carlos to resolve his loose ends before the engagement is formalized." She glanced toward Sophie's room. "He's running out of time, which makes him desperate." An hour later, our bags were packed and loaded into an unmarked SUV with tinted windows. 2 vehicles would travel with us, one ahead, one behind, with Victor's most elite security personnel. The plan was to leave after dark, using back roads to reach the lake house undetected. As dusk fell, I sat with Sophie on her bed, reading her favorite story as if it were any other night. She drifted off to sleep halfway through, exhausted from the excitement of packing for our adventure. I stroked her dark curls, studying the features that now seemed so obviously Maroney, the straight nose, the defined chin, those striking blue eyes. How had I never seen the resemblance before? A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Expecting Maria or Mrs. Reynolds, I was startled to find Victor standing in the doorway, his expression uncharacteristically tense. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, gently extracting myself from Sophie's side and pulling her door partially closed behind me as we moved into the suite sitting room. Victor looked different somehow, less the polished businessman, more the hardened fighter. He wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans, a stark departure from his usual tailored suits. A gun in a shoulder holster was visible beneath his open jacket. "There's been a change of plans," he said without preamble. "I'm coming with you tonight." "Why?" I searched his face, finding lines of strain I hadn't noticed before. "What's happened?" He hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell me. "Carlos made contact. He's requesting a meeting, brother to brother." "That's good, isn't it? A chance to negotiate?" A humorless smile twisted his lips. "Carlos doesn't negotiate. He manipulates, threatens, delays while positioning his pieces." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "This is a distraction. Intelligence suggests he's planning to move against you and Sophie while I'm occupied with his supposed peace offering. So we run," I said, understanding flooding me. "We disappear while you deal with him." Victor shook his head. "Not anymore. The lake house has been compromised. One of Carlos's informants knew about it." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "We're leaving the country tonight." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Leaving what? Where would we go?" "Sophie's medical care, her education, all arranged." He caught my hands in his, the contact sending an unexpected warmth through me despite the circumstances. "I have properties overseas, places Carlos has no knowledge of. You'll both be safe until this is resolved." "And you?" I asked, suddenly aware of how tightly I was gripping his fingers. "Are you coming with us?" Something flashed in his eyes, surprise perhaps, at my concern for him. "I'll join you when I can. First, I need to end this threat permanently." The implication was clear. Victor intended to kill his brother, Sophie's father. "There has to be another way," I said, though I wasn't sure why I was defending a man who'd planned my daughter's death. "Some compromise. With Carlos?" Victor's laugh held no humor. "My brother crossed the final line when he targeted Sophie. There's no coming back from that." His expression softened slightly. "You don't need to worry about the details. Just know that once this is finished, you'll both be free to live however you choose, with my protection or without it." The thought of a life without Victor's presence, after everything we'd been through, created an unexpected hollowness in my chest. When had he become more than just our protector? When had his rare smiles, his gentleness with Sophie, his unwavering resolve begun to matter so much? "I don't know if we can just walk away," I admitted quietly. He studied my face, something vulnerable breaking through his carefully maintained control. "That's a conversation for another day," he said finally. "Right now we need to move. The cars are ready." I nodded, turning to wake Sophie, but Victor caught my arm. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "About Carlos. About why he abandoned you when he learned about your pregnancy." I stilled, years of unanswered questions hanging between us. "Why?" "Our father had a second family, a mistress and 2 daughters he kept secret for decades. When the truth came out, it destroyed our mother. The scandal nearly ruined the family business." His eyes held mine intently. "Carlos swore he would never make the same mistake. When you told him you were pregnant, I became his mistake," I finished bitterly. "His potential scandal." Victor's jaw tightened. "He told me about you once, years ago. Drunk, bragging about the beautiful waitress he'd left behind when she tried to trap him with a pregnancy. I had you investigated immediately, intending to offer financial support anonymously." A shadow crossed his face. Then I saw Sophie's photo, saw the resemblance to Isabella, and I couldn't just walk away. The revelation should have hurt, the knowledge that I'd been nothing but a conquest to Carlos, that Victor's initial interest had been driven by family obligation, rather than genuine concern. But instead, I felt a strange relief. The truth, however painful, was cleaner than the uncertainty I'd lived with for years. "Thank you," I said simply, "for telling me, for everything you've done for Sophie." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes, a vulnerability I'd never seen before. "Natalia," he began, then stopped as his phone vibrated with an incoming message. The moment shattered as he checked the screen, his expression hardening instantly. "We need to go. Now." "What is it?" "Carlos's men have been spotted 2 miles from here." He moved to Sophie's door. "Wake her, gently. We leave in 5 minutes." Sophie stirred reluctantly when I shook her, confusion clouding her sleepy eyes. "Is it adventure time already?" she murmured. "Yes, sweet pea. We need to go now." I helped her into her shoes and coat, maintaining a calm demeanor despite the urgency pulsing through me. "Uncle Victor is coming with us." "Isn't that exciting?" She perked up at that, rubbing her eyes. "The scary man is coming too?" I froze. "What scary man, Sophie? The one who looks like Uncle Victor but isn't as nice." She yawned. "He showed me pictures on his phone yesterday. Pictures of you when you were younger." Terror gripped me. "Sophie, when did you see this man? Where?" "At school. He came to the fence during recess." She frowned, sensing my distress. "Was that bad?" "He said he was my daddy and that it was our secret game." Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous as he overheard her words. "Carlos approached her at school, before we brought you here?" Sophie shrank back at his tone, and I pulled her protectively against me. "It's okay, Sophie. You didn't do anything wrong, but it's very important. Did this man give you anything, or ask you to do anything?" She hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket, extracting a small, shiny object. "He gave me this special pin to wear. He said it would help him find me if I got lost." Victor crossed the room in 2 strides, taking the pin from her small hand. His face went pale as he examined it. "A tracking device," he said tersely. "Sophisticated, military grade." The implications crashed over me like ice water. Carlos hadn't needed to infiltrate the mansion's security. He'd had a direct line to Sophie's location all along, through a tracking device she'd been innocently carrying. "The cars are compromised," Victor said, already moving toward the suite's landline. "They'll be expecting us to leave by the main gate." He dialed rapidly, speaking in terse Italian to whoever answered. Sophie clutched my hand, finally sensing the danger. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" "No, sweet pea," I lied, forcing confidence into my voice. "Uncle Victor is just changing our plans a little bit. We're still going on our adventure." Victor hung up the phone, his expression grim but determined. "New extraction plan. Helicopter on the north lawn in 10 minutes. Minimal security team. Just Jensen and Alvarez. We travel light." He turned to Sophie, his voice gentling. "Do you like flying, little one?" Her eyes widened. "In a real helicopter." "A real helicopter," he confirmed, the ghost of a smile touching his lips despite the circumstances. "Like the ones in your books, but we need to hurry." As Victor led us through service corridors I'd never seen before, I realized how carefully he'd planned for this eventuality. Every turn revealed a security measure: reinforced doors, surveillance cameras, armed guards who nodded respectfully as we passed. The mansion wasn't just a home. It was a fortress designed with multiple escape routes. We emerged onto a dark lawn far from the main house, where the distant thrum of helicopter blades cut through the night air. 2 men in tactical gear approached us, weapons visible. "Status?" Victor demanded. "Perimeter breach on the east side, sir." The taller one, Jensen, I presumed, reported. "Carlos's team is inside the grounds. Approximately 8 hostiles. Our counter team is engaging, but they're using the distraction to penetrate deeper. Time frame? 3 minutes until they reach this position. Maybe less." Victor nodded sharply. "Get them to the chopper. I'll provide cover." Alarm shot through me. "What?" "No, you're coming with us." "Change of plans," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Carlos is leading this assault personally. This ends tonight." His eyes met mine, intense and urgent. I need you to take Sophie and go with these men. They'll get you to safety. And leave you here to die? I hissed, mindful of Sophie clinging to my side. That's your plan? A strange expression crossed his face, something almost like tenderness. My plan is to remove the threat to my family permanently, he said quietly. And then to find you again? Before I could respond, the distinctive crack of gunfire sounded from the direction of the main house. Sophie whimpered, and I instinctively pulled her closer. Time's up, Jensen said tensely. We need to move, sir. Victor knelt to Sophie's level, his expression gentling. Sophie, I need you to be very brave now. These men are going to take you and your mother somewhere safe. Her blue eyes, so like his, filled with tears. Are you coming too? Soon, he promised. I have to take care of something first, but I'll find you no matter what. He touched her cheek gently. You're a Maroney, and Maroneys always find their way back to family. She surprised us both by throwing her arms around his neck. Be careful, Uncle Victor. Something raw and vulnerable flashed across his face as he briefly returned her embrace. When he stood, his eyes met mine over Sophie's head, filled with things unspoken. Natalia, he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words, a first for the always composed Victor Maroney. The moment shattered as another burst of gunfire, closer now, split the night air. Jensen moved urgently toward the helicopter, its blades already spinning faster. Go, Victor said, drawing his weapon. I'll hold them here. Every instinct screamed at me to stay with him, to not let him face his brother alone, but Sophie's small hand in mine grounded me in reality. Her safety came first, would always come first. Find us, I said fiercely, the words somewhere between a command and a plea. When this is over, find us. Something shifted in his expression. Determination hardening into resolve. He moved forward suddenly, his free hand cupping my face, and kissed me with unexpected gentleness. I will, he promised against my lips. Now go. Jensen ushered us toward the waiting helicopter, his weapon drawn and ready. I kept Sophie's face pressed against my side, shielding her from the sight of Victor standing alone on the lawn, gun in hand, waiting to confront his brother for the final time. As the helicopter lifted into the night sky, I caught one last glimpse of him, a solitary figure in black, face turned up toward us, before the darkness swallowed him from view. 3 days passed in a blur of private jets, unmarked vehicles, and safe houses. Jensen and Alvarez remained with us, professional and vigilant, but frustratingly close-mouthed about what had happened after our departure. My repeated questions about Victor were met with the same response. No news yet, ma'am. We finally arrived at our destination on the 4th day, a secluded villa on the Italian coast, perched on cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean. Under different circumstances, it would have been paradise. Sophie immediately fell in love with the stone terrace and its infinity pool, the winding path that led down to a private beach, the brightly painted fishing boats bobbing in the distance. I tried to share her enthusiasm, to pretend this was simply a luxurious vacation. But each passing hour without word from Victor hollowed me out a little more. Had he survived the confrontation with Carlos? Was he injured, captured, or worse? The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. On the morning of the 5th day, I woke before dawn, restless, and unable to sleep. I made my way to the terrace, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders against the pre-dawn chill. The sea stretched endlessly before me, silver gray in the liminal light between night and day. The Mediterranean was always my mother's favorite view, a familiar voice said behind me. I whirled around, the blanket slipping from my shoulders. Victor stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. He looked exhausted, a fresh bandage visible at his temple, his right arm in a sling. But he was alive, gloriously, impossibly alive. Victor, I breathed, unable to form more coherent words. He moved toward me slowly, as if uncertain of his welcome. I told you I'd find you. What happened? I asked, searching his face for answers. Carlos is no longer a threat, he said simply, the words carrying finality without explicit details, to anyone. I should have felt relief, perhaps even satisfaction that the man who had threatened Sophie was gone. Instead, a complicated knot of emotions tightened in my chest, sorrow for the father Sophie would never know, regret for the reconciliation that could never happen, and overwhelming gratitude that Victor had survived. "You're hurt," I said, gesturing to his injuries. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You should see the other guy." The attempted humor, so unexpected from the usually serious Victor, broke something loose inside me. Before I could second-guess myself, I closed the distance between us, careful of his injured arm as I wrapped my arms around him. He stiffened momentarily, as if unused to being embraced, before his good arm came around me, pulling me tightly against him. We stood like that for a long moment, his heartbeat strong and steady against my cheek, proof of life more reassuring than any words. "I thought you were dead," I admitted into the soft fabric of his shirt. When days passed with no word. His hand moved to stroke my hair, the gesture surprisingly tender. "I had to make sure it was safe before I contacted you, that all loose ends were tied up." I pulled back slightly to see his face. "And are they? Is it over?" Something haunted flickered in his eyes. "Carlos is gone. The Kozlov family has withdrawn from our territories. Those loyal to my brother have been dealt with." He hesitated. "But there will always be threats in my world, Natalia. Always enemies waiting for weakness. And that's why you came alone," I realized, noting the absence of security personnel. "No entourage, no guards." He nodded slowly. "No one knows you're here, not even my most trusted people. This place existed off-book, a contingency I created years ago." His good hand came up to touch my face, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "I needed to give you a choice." "What choice?" "To stay hidden, protected. New identities, unlimited resources, a normal life for Sophie." He gestured toward the villa, the beautiful coastline beyond. "All this would be yours, with no connection to the Moroni name or its dangers." His voice roughened. "Or to come back with me, to accept what being part of my family truly means." I studied his face in the strengthening dawn light. The scars, the lines of authority and burden, the unexpected gentleness in eyes that could turn cold with deadly purpose when needed. "And if we choose to stay hidden?" I asked carefully. "What then?" Pain flashed across his features, quickly masked. "Then I leave today. Establish a secure communication protocol for emergencies only. Visit perhaps once a year if it's safe." He drew a controlled breath. "You would be free, Natalia, both of you. Free, but alone," I said softly. "Safe," he corrected. "And if we come back with you?" Something dangerous and hopeful kindled in his eyes. "Then you accept everything that comes with being a Moroni. The protection, the privilege, the danger. Sophie would be acknowledged publicly as my niece, my heir. You would never be ordinary again." I thought of Sophie, sleeping peacefully inside, unaware that her future was being decided in this pre-dawn conversation. She deserved a normal childhood, free from fear and violence. But she also deserved family, the uncle who had risked everything to protect her, who looked at her with the same love I felt. And what did I deserve, after years of struggling alone? The safety of anonymity, or the complicated protection of Victor Moroni's world? The simple life I'd always known, or the dangerous, exhilarating path that had opened before me? "I need to think about it," I said finally, "for Sophie's sake." He nodded, disappointment warring with understanding in his expression. "Of course." We stood in silence as the sun crested the horizon, painting the sea in shades of gold and pink. Victor's arm remained around me, warm and solid, as if he was memorizing the feeling of holding me in case it was the last time. "Uncle Victor," Sophie's excited voice broke the moment as she burst onto the terrace in her pajamas. "You found us." His face transformed with genuine joy as she launched herself at him. He caught her one-armed, wincing slightly at the impact against his injuries, but his smile never faltered. "I promised I would, didn't I?" he said, kneeling to her level. Moronis always keep their promises to family. As I watched them together, Sophie chattering excitedly about the villa, Victor listening with rapt attention, I realized the decision had already been made. We were already a family, bound by blood and choice, and the shared danger we'd survived. The path ahead would never be simple or entirely safe. Victor's world held darkness and violence alongside its protection and privilege. But it also held him, this complicated, dangerous man who had become essential to us both. Later, when Sophie had dragged Victor off to show him her favorite spot on the beach, I stood alone on the terrace once more. The Mediterranean stretched before me, vast and beautiful and unknown, like the future that awaited us if we chose to embrace the Maroney name fully. I had never been one to choose the dangerous path. All my life, I'd sought safety, stability, the well-worn roads of ordinary existence. But watching Victor and Sophie on the beach below, their dark heads bent together in conversation, their matching profiles outlined against the sparkling sea, I knew there was no going back to the life I'd known before. For better or worse, our futures were intertwined with Victor Maroney's. The only question that remained was whether we would embrace that fate openly or continue to hide in the shadows, always looking over our shoulders. As if sensing my thoughts, Victor looked up from the beach, his eyes finding mine across the distance. Even from here, I could see the question in them, the vulnerability beneath the strength, the hope behind the carefully maintained control. I smiled, the decision settling into certainty in my heart, and began to make my way down the path toward them, toward family, toward home, toward whatever awaited us in Victor Maroney's dangerous, beautiful world. 6 months later, snow dusted the grounds of the Maroney estate, transforming the gardens into a winter wonderland that delighted Sophie. From my position at the window of the east wing, I watched her build a lopsided snowman with Mrs. Reynolds, their laughter visible in puffs of condensation against the cold air. 2 security men maintained a discreet distance, their vigilance never wavering despite the peaceful scene. "She looks happy." Victor's voice came from behind me, warm and familiar now. I turned to find him standing in the doorway of our suite, snowflakes melting on the shoulders of his black wool coat. In the months since our return from Italy, he'd softened somehow, the razor-sharp edges of his personality gentled by Sophie's presence in his life. "She is happy," I confirmed, accepting the coffee he offered, "especially since you promised to take her sledding this weekend." A smile touched his lips. "The East Hill has the perfect gradient. My sister and I used to race down it as children." These casual mentions of his past, of the family he'd lost and mourned, had become more frequent. Like ice gradually thawing, Victor had begun to share pieces of himself, small fragments of the boy he'd been before responsibility and violence had shaped him into the man he became. Our return to the mansion had brought changes no one could have predicted. Victor had publicly acknowledged Sophie as his niece and heir, a move that sent shockwaves through both legitimate business circles and the shadowy world he still commanded. The Maroney name, once whispered with fear, now carried a different weight, still powerful, but evolving into something more complex under Victor's leadership. "The board meeting went well?" I asked, noting the satisfaction in his expression. "Better than expected. The expansion into clean energy investments is proceeding ahead of schedule." He removed his coat, revealing the tailored suit beneath. Even now, seeing him dressed this way, stirred something in me. The powerful businessman and the dangerous protector, both aspects of the man I'd come to love. The Foundation's first round of scholarships will be announced next month. The Isabella Maroney Foundation, established in his sister's memory, had become Victor's passion project, channeling millions into medical research and educational opportunities for underprivileged children. It was just one facet of the transformation he'd begun, gradually shifting family resources from shadowy enterprises to legitimate businesses. Not that the other side of his world had disappeared entirely. There were still nights when he returned late, grim-faced and silent. Still coded phone calls and meetings behind closed doors. Still the ever-present security and the knowledge that enemies watched from the shadows, waiting for vulnerability. But those darker elements no longer defined him. Not to me, and increasingly, not to himself. "Ms. Powell mentioned Sophie's reading has jumped 2 grade levels," I said, moving to straighten his tie out of habit. "She's talking about skipping her ahead in the mathematics curriculum." Pride brightened his eyes. "She has her mother's intelligence." His hand caught mine, keeping it against his chest, and determination. The compliment warmed me, as his words increasingly did. In the beginning, affection had been difficult for Victor, expressed through protection, through practical arrangements, through material comforts rather than words. Now, he was learning a new language, one of emotional vulnerability and open affection. "The gala preparations are complete," I told him, changing subjects, "though I still think hosting 200 people here is a security nightmare." He laughed, the sound still rare enough to delight me. "Jensen has been saying the same thing for weeks. But the Children's Hospital needs the funding, and the Maroney family making such a public charitable effort sends the right message, the right message." The subtle reshaping of the Maroney legacy was ongoing, a delicate balance between maintaining the power that kept us safe and building something more legitimate for Sophie's future. Victor's long game, played with the same strategic brilliance he'd once devoted exclusively to expanding his organization's influence. "I should check on Sophie," I said, glancing out at the garden where her snowman now sported what looked suspiciously like one of Mrs. Reynolds' scarves. Victor's hand tightened slightly on mine. "Wait, there's something we need to discuss first." The seriousness in his tone made me tense. "What is it? Is there a new threat?" "No, nothing like that." He led me to the sitting area, an unusual nervousness in his movements as he sat beside me. "It's about us, about the future." My heart quickened. Despite sharing my bed for months, despite the depth of feeling between us, Victor had maintained a certain reserve, as if expecting everything to be snatched away at any moment. "What about the future?" I asked carefully. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box that made my breath catch. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." A self-deprecating smile touched his lips. "I'm discovering I'm not particularly good at this part, Victor." He opened the box, revealing a ring that gleamed even in the winter light. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum. Beautiful, but not ostentatious. "Perfect. I never expected to want this," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Family, connection, a life beyond the organization." Then Sophie appeared, and you with her, and suddenly everything changed. He took my hand, his eyes, so like Sophie's, holding mine with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "I know what I am, Natalia, what I've done. The darkness that will always be part of me." His thumb brushed over my knuckles. "But you make me want to be more than that. You and Sophie. You've given me a reason to build something better." I blinked back unexpected tears. "Are you proposing, Victor Maroney?" A ghost of his dangerous smile appeared. "I'm trying to, if you'd let me finish." I laughed softly, emotion tightening my throat. "Sorry. Continue." He took the ring from its box, holding it between us. "I can't promise a normal life. There will always be risks, always be aspects of my world that are dangerous. But I can promise you this: every resource I command, every ounce of power I possess, will always be devoted to protecting you and Sophie, to making a future where the Maroney name means something her children can be proud of. The implicit promise of a shared future. Children, legacy, generations, made my heart swell. That sounds an awful lot like love, for a man who claimed he wasn't capable of it. Something vulnerable and fierce flashed in his eyes. "I never said I wasn't capable, just that I'd never felt it before you." He slid to one knee before me, still holding the ring. "Marry me, Natalia. Be my wife. My partner, in whatever comes next." 6 months ago, I would have hesitated, weighed the dangers against the protection, considered what it meant to bind myself permanently to a man like Victor Maroney. But I'd seen beneath the surface now, witnessed the man behind the power, learned the depth of his capacity for love beneath the carefully maintained control. "Yes," I said simply, extending my hand. The ring slid onto my finger, a perfect fit like everything else Victor arranged. He rose, pulling me into a kiss that still held the power to make my knees weak, tender and possessive all at once. "Sophie will be thrilled," I murmured against his lips. "She's been dropping hints about wanting to be a flower girl for weeks." He laughed, the sound lightening the room. "Mrs. Reynolds may have mentioned something about that." His expression grew more serious. "I want to adopt her, Natalia. Legally make her my daughter, not just my niece, if you're comfortable with that." The offer stole my breath. Sophie had flourished under Victor's attention, blossoming from a shy child into a confident, curious girl who had her uncle wrapped around her little finger. Their bond had grown deep and genuine, built on shared books and chess games, on patient explanations and unwavering protection. "You already are her father in every way that matters," I said softly. The papers would just make official what we already know. Relief and joy transformed his face, making him look younger, unburdened. He kissed me again, deeper this time, his hands pulling me closer. A shriek of laughter from the garden broke the moment. We turned to see Sophie racing across the snow, pursued by one of the younger security guards wielding a snowball. "We should tell her," I said, my hand finding Victor's. "About the engagement, about the adoption, all of it." He nodded, squeezing my fingers gently. "Tonight. We'll make it a proper celebration." As we watched Sophie through the window, her face flushed with cold and happiness, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. From that first day in the mansion, terrified and uncertain, to this moment of belonging and purpose. The path had been dangerous, filled with revelations and threats, but it had led to something I'd never expected to find. A family, a home, a future secured by Victor Moroni's love and protection. The gala transformed the mansion's grand ballroom into a glittering wonderland of crystal and candlelight. 200 of the city's most influential people mingled under the watchful eyes of security personnel, disguised as waitstaff, raising glasses to toast the Isabella Moroni Foundation and its founder. I stood at the edge of the crowd, still uncomfortable sometimes with the attention that came with being Victor Moroni's fiancée. My simple black gown had been selected by the stylist Victor insisted on hiring, the sapphire ring on my finger catching the light with every movement. "Mommy, look!" Sophie appeared at my side, resplendent in a midnight blue dress that matched her eyes. "Uncle Victor, Papa, is going to make a speech." The transition to Papa had been her idea, embraced with touching enthusiasm once we'd explained the adoption. The papers had been signed last week, making official what our hearts had already known. We were a family, bound by choice as much as blood. At the center of the room, Victor commanded attention without effort. Immaculate in his tuxedo, he radiated the quiet power that had always defined him, tempered now by something new, a sense of purpose beyond power itself. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hushed room. "Thank you for joining us tonight to support a cause very close to my heart." As he spoke about the foundation, about the children it would help, about the legacy he hoped to build, I saw the gathered crowd respond to the transformation in him. The whispers that had followed us for months, about Victor Moroni's unexpected change of direction, about his newly acknowledged niece, about the woman who had supposedly tamed him, seemed to fade in the face of his genuine passion for this new endeavor. "None of this would be possible," he continued, his eyes finding mine across the room, "without the extraordinary woman who reminded me what family truly means. Natalia, would you join me?" Surprised, I made my way to his side, conscious of all eyes turning toward me. Victor took my hand, the simple gesture communicating volumes to those who knew him well. "Tonight, I'm pleased to announce 2 pieces of news," he said, his thumb brushing over my ring. "First, the Isabella Moroni Foundation will be expanding its mission to include support for single parents facing medical crises, with an initial endowment of $50 million. Applause rippled through the crowd, genuine approval mingling with the calculated support of those who understood the value of remaining in Victor Moroni's good graces. "And second," he continued, his voice softening as he turned to face me directly, "I'm honored to introduce my fiancée, Natalia Cortez, who has agreed to become my wife and partner in all things." More applause, accompanied by surprised murmurs from those who hadn't yet heard of our engagement. I smiled up at him, still sometimes amazed by the journey that had brought us together, from fear to trust, from uncertainty to love. "I'd also like to introduce our daughter, Sophie," Victor added, gesturing for Sophie to join us. She bounded forward, all excitement and pride as Victor lifted her effortlessly with one arm. "Who reminds me every day why this foundation's mission matters. The image we presented, Victor Moroni with his new family, would be in every society page tomorrow, the final confirmation of the transformation many had speculated about." The dangerous criminal evolving into something more complex, still powerful, still feared in certain circles, but building a legacy beyond violence and control. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, I found a moment alone with Victor on the terrace, the winter air crisp around us. "You're building something remarkable," I said, nodding toward the ballroom where Foundation Board members continued to network. Isabella would be proud. Pain and gratitude flashed across his features at the mention of his sister. "I hope so." He drew me closer, his warmth a barrier against the cold. I used to think power was the only protection worth having, control through fear, loyalty purchased rather than earned. "And now?" I prompted when he fell silent. "Now I understand what my father never did. That true strength comes from what you build, not what you control. From the legacy you leave." His eyes, reflecting the lights from the ballroom, held a depth of emotion that still surprised me sometimes. "Sophie will inherit something worth having, not just an empire built on fear. She'll inherit your wisdom too," I said softly. "Your capacity for protection, your strategic mind. Those aren't small gifts, Victor," he smiled, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "From you, she gets compassion, resilience, the ability to see good even in complicated people. Like her father," I said, meaning him rather than Carlos, a distinction he understood immediately. "I'm still not a good man by conventional standards," he warned, a reminder he still felt compelled to voice occasionally, as if I might suddenly realize who and what he was. "Good is subjective," I countered, reaching up to touch his face. "You're the right man for us, that's what matters." From inside came the sound of Sophie's laughter, bright and uninhibited. She'd charmed every guest at the gala, a natural diplomat who somehow combined Victor's confidence with my warmth. In her, I could see the future taking shape, the new generation of the Maroney family, raised with love rather than fear, power tempered by compassion. "We should get her to bed," Victor said, though he made no move to leave the quiet intimacy of the terrace. "It's well past her bedtime, 5 more minutes." I murmured, echoing Sophie's favorite delay tactic. "I like having you to myself for a moment." His laugh rumbled through his chest, the sound still rare enough to treasure. "Mrs. Reynolds is perfectly capable of wrangling one small girl into pajamas. Mrs. Reynolds is currently teaching that small girl how to play poker with the security team," I informed him. "Apparently our daughter has quite the poker face." "Another useful Maroney trait," he noted, pride evident in his voice. "Though perhaps we should save gambling lessons for when she's a bit older." The casual way he spoke of the future, of years stretching ahead of us, of Sophie growing up under our shared guidance, filled me with a contentment I'd never expected to find, especially not with a man like Victor Maroney. "When I first came here," I said quietly, "I was terrified of you." He nodded, no surprise in his expression. "As you should have been. I was a different man then." "No," I corrected him gently. "You were the same man. I just couldn't see past the surface. Couldn't see the depth of your capacity for love behind all that control." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "You saw what no one else did," he admitted. "Possibility rather than threat." "I saw you," I said simply. "The real you, beneath everything else." He pulled me closer, his kiss carrying the passion that still flared between us, undiminished by months of intimacy. When we finally separated, his expression held a rare openness. "I love you, Natalia," he said, the words still new enough to carry weight. "You and Sophie. You've given me a life I never thought possible." "We love you too," I replied, the truth of it warming me against the winter chill. "All of you. Not just the parts that are easy to love." From inside came Sophie's voice, calling for us to come see her card trick. Victor smiled, offering his arm with old-world courtesy. "Duty calls," he said, his tone light, but his eyes serious. "Our daughter awaits. Our daughter." The words settled around my heart like a promise fulfilled. We'd found our way to family through danger and revelation, through fear and protection, through the complicated legacy of the Maroney name. As we walked back into the warmth of the ballroom, Victor's hand steady at my waist, I caught our reflection in the tall windows, the three of us together, Sophie running to meet us, her face alight with joy. Not a conventional family by any standard, formed through circumstances no one could have predicted, but bound by something stronger than blood or name or power. Love, choice, the decision to build something lasting from the broken pieces of the past. Victor lifted Sophie into his arms, her delighted laughter echoing through the now empty ballroom. As I watched them together, the dangerous man who had become her father, the little girl who had softened his hardened heart, I knew we had found our resolution, our happily ever after wrapped in complications and complexity. The Maroney name would always carry weight, would always attract both respect and danger. But we had transformed its meaning, forging a new legacy from the shadow of the old. And in that transformation, in that conscious choice to build rather than destroy, we had found our true home, not in the mansion's grand halls or Victor's global properties, but in each other, in family, redefined through love.